At Eastern Bank, we believe that growing business should also grow the community. That's why we work to give all business owners what they need to take their dreams to the next level. Our dedication to small businesses and communities has inspired us to create the Equity Alliance for Business program and become the #1 SBA lender in Massachusetts for 15 years running. We're proud to be here for all businesses, big and small. See the good we can do for you by visiting easternbank.com/business.
This is what it sounds like.
Member FDIC.
How does an actress find the perfect accent for her character? How do members of an indie rock band figure out their harmonies? How does a crossword puzzle creator come up with clues? You'll find the answers to these questions and many more on Working, the podcast about how creative professionals get stuff done. Join me, June Thomas, and my co-hosts Isaac Butler and Ronald Young Jr. as we learn how writers outline novels, how composers get jobs and get paid, and how YouTube creators learn how to look into the camera lens. Listen to Working from Slate every Sunday, wherever you listen.
Welcome to Say More from Boston Globe Opinion. This is part 3 of our new series, Say More on Beating Burnout. I'm Shirley Leung. On the last show, we talked to Cal Newport about burnout at work. This week, I want to go deeper because burnout is more than just being overloaded. It disconnects us from each other. When we were planning this series, people kept telling me I needed to talk to Krista Tippett, the creator and host of the On Being podcast. At first, I was a little confused. Her focus is on spirituality. What does that have to do with burnout? Turns out the Krista fans were spot on. These things are deeply connected. Burnout is a spiritual issue. Krista says our minds and bodies are fried.
What I know is coming through the pandemic, those years, that very dramatic experience we had, among other things, really distressed nervous systems. Each of us and all of us together had a stress response, the full stress response. And the way it works when we're healthy and when we're regulated is that it goes up and then our body brings us back down to calm, to equilibrium. And what we had is years on high stress response, no relief, a lot of fear, and a lot of uncertainty. It's important to remember that our bodies internalize uncertainty itself as a threat. So when I look at, what people are talking about when they talk about burnout, when they talk about exhaustion, I don't think we have even begun to fully metabolize what we've been through, or metabolize what's going on still in our bodies in a way that we can really get to a new kind of health. So that's what I see.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I feel like I've been on a roller coaster. I mean, It's been 4 years, right?
Yeah. And we have.
We have. So how is your nervous system? I mean, have you struggled with burnout yourself?
Oh, yeah. I mean, during the pandemic, I certainly went through a really dark period. And it wasn't right at the beginning because I think for me, and I don't know if this was true for others, I think in the beginning, and by which I mean maybe the first 6 months, 6 to 9 months, I was powering through. And, I was actually in my work offering what I could. But then I certainly hit a point of, I would say, what felt really like depression. And I am somebody who's experienced clinical depression. And so that was scary. It was mood, but it was also not being able to think clearly, right? Not being able to concentrate. It was hard to read. It was hard to sleep. And of course, a lot of anxiety, which manifests in different ways. I think I've certainly been helped because I was specifically focusing on pursuing this question of what was happening inside us and how we could, I don't know, how I could not just kind of make peace with that, but kind of befriend what was happening inside me. And that actually is my definition of spiritual life at its best, is befriending reality. And that means reality in all of its glory and its messiness.
So let's talk about that. I mean, what role do you think faith and spirituality have in helping us cope with these feelings of burnout? I mean, or do they have a role at all?
If we really try to break down what spiritual life is at its core, it's really interior life, right? It is
That's
the
right.
inner work
Yeah.
of being human. I think, quite irrespective of pandemic and the particular stresses of being alive right now, we inhabit a very noisy, distracting world, right? Also to an extent that our species truly has never experienced before with our technological devices. And so this work of getting quiet inside, it is work, right? It's not something that automatically comes to us. I interviewed once a wonderful, I think he was an acoustic audiologist or something like that.
Yeah, this is Gordon Hempton,
Gordon
right?
Hempton.
Yes.
He talked about he was out to preserve silence, which is an endangered species. He says he had this wonderful line that silence is the jukebox of the soul.
Wow, I love that.
But silence again. We really have to make space, like carve out time. This thing, silence, that our 21st century world is really doing its best to vanquish, is something that we need. I really think we need it, like we need water and like we need food. And to your question about burnout, this may be a huge, huge part of it. Just this very elemental thing we're lacking.
Yeah, that's one of my pet peeves with my 11 and 13-year-olds. They both have cell phones, and their cell phones are always on. Like this morning, I was telling the 11-year-old, "Do you really need to be watching YouTube while you're brushing your teeth?
Yeah.
Why can't you just brush your teeth?"
Yeah.
So what advice do you have? I mean, how do we achieve silence in our modern lives? I mean, we have push notifications, alarms, everything else. I mean, I usually walk around with like 6 alarms on my phones. I can't even keep straight which one's going off. And so, I mean, how do we achieve it? Silence is so hard.
Yeah. People I know who have cultivated interior life tend to have some kind of morning practice. And that can be really modest. And I think my morning practice is very modest, right? It truly doesn't have to be meditating twice a day for 20 minutes or spending an hour in silence. But if you can, and this is tricky at different times in life when you've got little children, right? All of that. And I've been through all of those stages. Teenagers is another thing entirely. But if you can just commit even to 2 minutes of some kind of practice of just getting still, shake it up, try some different things. Of course, there are apps, which turns us back to technology. But I think a lot of people know like the Headspace app or the Calm app. I really like the Plum Village app, which is very low tech. It's from the Plum Village community of Thich Nhat Hanh in France. And they have beautiful body practices and just kind of meditations. I would say for making a home inside yourself. And some of them are 5 minutes long and some of them are 20 minutes long. So you don't have to figure this out by yourself. Something else that I have done across time, and this could be instead of that or in addition to it, is something I call contemplative reading, because sometimes I think also because we're just so hyperactive, right? And our minds are not just engaged all the time, but they're going in 100 different directions. So it's actually not that easy an ask for us to just sit down and be quiet or sit down and breathe. And it's not what I always want to do either. But I will usually have some book And it might be a book of poetry, and it might just be a really thoughtful book that I want to read, but know that I am not going to sit down and read 250 pages of it. But I will just take something like that almost as meditation, like a poem or a page or a paragraph, and just give them that time over that 5 or 10 minutes to reading that short thing and have some blank paper. Like I always keep a big journal, actually just a big art book, not a journal. I like a great big piece of paper kind of on my lap. And maybe I kind of, even just copy out lines of that poem or from this thing I read that are beautiful to me that I want to have a record of, or perhaps I find myself coming into conversation with this poem or this reading, and I just start writing some notes. But, and that's what journaling is. It's getting into conversation with yourself. And that also is interior life. So the thing about meditating or getting quiet or even praying is that we all get distracted and we feel like we failed. What I know about this, what I know about this kind of spiritual discipline is that I don't necessarily I mostly don't come out of it feeling like, wow, I was really great. That was totally refreshing. I'm transformed. But what I know is that once I make that a part of my life, I find that if I don't do it, I miss it, right? So I find that it is nourishing me in ways that I don't control. And
the ritual of it.
Yeah, the ritual of it. Yeah.
More of my conversation with Krista Tippett after this short break.
At Eastern Bank, we believe in good business. That's why we provide clients with a suite of products and services made to take their businesses to the next level. From express business loans to seamless cash management solutions, we make it easy to grow when the time is right. As a trusted full-service bank and the #1 SBA lender in Massachusetts for 15 years running, we understand what you need to keep your business thriving. See the good we can do for you by visiting easternbank.com/business.
This is what it sounds like.
Member FDIC.
Sometimes things in the world of technology are complicated and need careful explaining. Sometimes they just need a little hard truth.
I don't think anyone is going to buy a banana with crypto at any point in the foreseeable future.
I'm Lizzie O'Leary, the host of Slate's What Next TBD, your clear-eyed guide to technology, power, and the future. Friday and Sunday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Throughout the last century, fewer and fewer people identify with religion.
Yeah.
I grew up going to church, but now my Sunday mornings are all about my kids' basketball games. And so why do you think people have moved away from organized religion?
I just think we should stop every once in a while and take a really deep breath, all of us, to think about the massive time of change we're living in, right? So there's so much seismic change. Even if we didn't have all the crisis we have, right? That we're the generation of our species that is redefining marriage and family and gender. And we are truly, in the West, the first generation of our species to not, and truly, and just a handful of time, right, to not inherit a deep, deep religious identity, right, and community, and kind of entire enveloping world of practice. That has been true of human beings across time in just about every culture, in every culture I know of. That has been an interesting thing about starting the show 20 years ago. This phenomenon that you just named was happening, but it's so much accelerated now.
Right.
What I'm also watching is just because the institutions fall away doesn't mean that this part of humanity falls away. Doesn't mean that these questions go away. Doesn't mean that our need for interior life goes away, right? Doesn't mean that our sense of mystery or mortality become less urgent, less defining. That's what I'm watching. And I think one of the most interesting things I'm seeing is, I think in the last, 10, 20, 30 years, you had a lot of people growing up raised by parents who were alienated from the traditions or the institutions of their childhood, and really actively did not want to pass on to their kids what had been given to them or imposed on them. What you have now are a lot of people who are growing up without any kind of religious indoctrination, training for moral formation. They have no baggage, right? And so they still come to this place in themselves, and it may be when they're teenagers, and it may be when they have children of their own, start asking these questions and start wondering. And they're asking the same questions that gave rise to these traditions. So I think that interesting. So we are in this in-between time with so much else, so much breaking and so much being born. And I'm watching, what emerges from this? And I do think this comes back to the burnout, the uncertainty we're living with. Some of this uncertainty is also it's not just about what is breaking, it's about the new things being born, but we're this in-between generation where we can't see. We are the ones who are left with the breakage, and we are the ones who have to kind of make up the new forms in real time. And that is stressful. And it's full of possibility. And so in addition, I think to speaking that truth out loud, as much as we can kind of be there for each other and even just acknowledge that uncertainty bears down on us, right? Like even just giving voice to that and knowing that we're not alone with it is also, and the scientists who really pay attention to the nervous systems would say this too. There's something in how we can see each other and walk alongside each other and not leave each other alone that literally helps, not just spiritually, but physiologically.
Yes. So I want to ask you a little bit more about your personal background. You studied theology at Yale Divinity School.
Yeah.
What motivated
in my
you?
30s.
In your 30s. Okay.
Yeah.
So what motivated you to study that? Were you planning to be a minister?
I was a young reporter. I was interested in politics, in my 20s, in the 1980s. I was in divided Berlin. I was in Germany, and I was interested in the Cold War, and I was interested in nuclear weapons, and I thought all of these things were about life and death. This was the life and death struggle, but I was living in this place in divided Berlin where the world was divided into two, and I saw that people create lives of beauty and dignity and intimacy or not, and it wasn't about which side of that wall they were born on. That we have these raw materials of the lives we've been given, and it is this choice and it's a process of what we do with that. And I didn't see politics interested in that or addressing that. And that to me was the interesting drama, was on the ground and not primarily the wall or the weapons. And the place I could find asking that question of, and just having a curiosity and also a nurture for this process by which any of us either creates a life of meaning or not, like that, it was this part of the human enterprise of religion and these great spiritual traditions that pursued those questions across time and across generations. So that's why I went to seminary.
And so I feel like when people listen to you on your podcasts, I mean, I know anecdotally there are a lot of people who turn to On Being for guidance and inspiration and have for many years. I mean, do you think of yourself that way, as a spiritual leader of sorts?
No, I don't. I get nervous. I mean, that's so interesting. That's not what I set out to do. I mean, it feels like a great responsibility. And yeah, it's just interesting to me that that's how it's evolved. I think I am always learning and seeking, right? And curious and pursuing. Like, I'm not in my interviews as a guru or an expert. I'm in there asking questions. So I think somebody asked me at a religious event years ago if I considered my work to be a ministry, and I And I said, I said, and I've thought about this since, that if it's a ministry, it's not a ministry of preaching, but of listening. So in that sense, I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah, you're like the new organized religion. It's about listening. I love it. So, I mean, we talked a lot about kind of uncertain times that we live in right now, especially post-pandemic. I mean, we even started talking about climate change, or, we've talked about,
absolutely,
I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Stark inequalities, certainly polarizing politics.
Racial reckoning, we've got it all. Yeah.
we got 6 more things we could tick off.
Yeah.
So, and you gave a TED Talk last fall, and there's a line that stuck with me about how we should focus less on the pain of life and more on its promise. So how do we do that?
Yeah, I guess what I don't want to say is not to focus on the pain, but I want us to hold the complexity of the world and the complexity of ourselves. I want us to hold all of that. We actually have to get a little more conscious to focus on what is beautiful and what is restorative and what is hopeful. We're so instinctively wired to orient to what is threatening. That is the most primitive part of our brains, right? And we're in the 21st century, and we have really grown up problems, right? So when I say that we need to take in the seriousness alongside of all those things that are genuinely threatening, we need to take in the seriousness of what is beautiful and redemptive and hopeful, and, all of the incredible social creativity that is all around us, even at the same time that there is so much social fracture. That is about growing up. That is about seeing life and reality in its fullness. And we will not rise to meet the dangers and the reckonings that are before us if we don't muster also our ability to see, to imagine and work for a beyond of those things. And if we don't rely on the parts of us that are courageous, right? And that honor what we love, and that will fight not just against what we want to go away, but for the world we want to pass on to new generations. That means we have to be clear about what we do find beautiful and worthy, and about the world we want to make, not just what we want to tear down or avoid. That's what I'm saying.
So you got to indulge me here a little bit. So do you remember how you ended your conversation with Surgeon General Vivek Murthy?
When I asked him to do a blessing?
Yes, you asked him to close out with a benediction of sorts. And so I was wondering if you would be willing to offer something like that for my listeners, maybe even recite a favorite line or two from a poem, kind of a benediction for burnout, perhaps.
Can I read you a poem by one of my colleagues called The Facts of Life?
Yes, please.
Which I think I can pull up right now as we are speaking, because we live. Now, see what I mean? We just talked about how technology is ruining our attention span, but it also allows us to look up poems instantaneously. It's called The Facts of Life by Padraig O'Tuama. He's a Northern Irish poet. And I think this is a poem that again, as we talked about, tells the truth of reality in a way that allows us to settle into reality and feel a little bit more at home with it rather than stressed out and alienated by it. The facts of life: that you were born and you will die, that you will sometimes love enough and sometimes not, that you will lie, if only to yourself, that you will get tired, that you will learn most from the situations you did not choose, that there will be some things that move you more than you can say, that you will live, that you must be loved, that you will avoid questions most urgently in need of your attention. That you began as the fusion of a sperm and an egg of two people who once were strangers and may well still be. That life isn't fair. That life is sometimes good and sometimes even better than good. That life is often not so good. That life is real, and if you can survive it, well, survive it well, with love and art and meaning given where meaning's scarce. That you will learn to live with regret, that you will learn to live with respect, that the structures that constrict you may not be permanently constricting, that you will probably be okay, that you must accept change before you die, but you will die anyway. So you might as well live, and you might as well love. You might as well love. You might as well love.
Oh, I love that, Krista. That is so you. It's so real, not Pollyannish, but real and calming. And I love that the last two lines are about love. I mean, every time I listen to Vivek Murthy doing that benediction, I tear up. I don't know why. It gets me every single time. And it's all about being loved, right?
And love is real and love is serious. Love is not this is 20th century calculus. Like, love is soft. No, love is the hardest thing we do. And it is serious and it is essential.
Well, Krista, thanks so much for being on the show, talking to us about how to work through our burnout. This was just great.
Oh, thank you. I so enjoyed it. Blessings to you and your listeners. Yeah.
Thank you. Krista Tippett is the creator and host of the On Being podcast, which explores deep questions about meaning in modern life. Next week, we continue our series, Say More on Beating Burnout.
We did an event in London when the book came out, and someone said, I just got out of the hospital yesterday because of just stress.
Emily Nagoski started out as a sex therapist, and then she accidentally became an expert on stress. She says you can't self-help your way out of burnout.
Burnout may be experienced as an individual struggle, but the cure for it is not individual behaviors. The cure for burnout is all of us caring for each other.
We hope you'll listen. Today's episode was produced by Anna Kusmer. Our editor is Jim Dow. Our engineer is Zuzair Ahmed. Our music is from APM Music. If you like the show, please follow us and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can email us at saymore@globe.com. I'm Shirley Leung. Thanks for listening.
Are you looking for ideas to make your life happier, healthier, more productive, and more creative? Listen to Happier with Gretchen Rubin, a weekly podcast hosted by two sisters. I'm Gretchen Rubin, the #1 best-selling author of The Happiness Project.
And I'm Elizabeth Kraft, a Hollywood showrunner. Each week we share fresh insights and practical solutions, such as follow the 1-minute rule, choose a one-word theme for the year, or design your summer.
Listen and follow the podcast Happier with Gretchen Rubin.
Life doesn't come with an instruction manual, but the Life Kit podcast gets you pretty close. Whether we're helping you tackle life-altering questions or just your everyday pickles, we've got deeply human solutions to your deeply human problems. Listen now to the Life Kit podcast from NPR.